Hello folks, I hope the weekend's going okay for you. Quick apologies first, I didn't post a video last week because I kind of ended up running around between different shows and stuff and kind of time. And this week, due to unforeseen circumstances, in that I seem to have unfortunately put my back out last Monday. It's a bit tender, it's getting better, but I'm going to do something a bit more restrained this week. So although not strictly to do with bikes per se, I thought I'd give you a quick tour of my workshop. Before I start, this is where I used to keep my bikes. A small 5x5 or something similar shed, which now doubles up rather nicely as my 8-year-old daughter's playhouse. I spent the time with this saving up all my pennies to eventually buy this. This is a 20x10 shed, complete with an air extraction and ventilation system down there. Right. The first thing you'll see, obviously, as you go in, are the two bikes. Now, the poor old Enfield's currently not too well at the moment. Last Monday, I did tightening up all the nuts and bolts on her. The tank split at the back, and I was having petrol going everywhere, to be quite honest. So it's a big panic to try and get the tank emptied and keep the petrol being mopped up. Dangerous. But I've got a sneaking suspicion it's doing all that, running around like a blue-ass fly doing that probably put my back out. But ho hum, at least I saved most of the petrol and didn't catch lights or anything. Right, both bikes, as I said before, live on battery optimizers, so they're all ready to go. Right, starting at the entrance here, and we have up here cable ties, cleaning rags and polishing rags. In those bags you've got a selection of things like plastic bags and piping, which always come in handy. And moving on down, you have things like fans for hot weather, and although not strictly Black & Decker ones, two workmate type benches come in handy sometimes with other stuff. Underneath this first bench, you'll see tyre changing stuff and wheel balancing stuff, that sort of things, and also stuff to wash bikes with. And up the top here, you've got the main power into the shed there. You've got an angle grinder set up on a permanent stand here to be used for bar cutting. A bandsaw next to that. And some of my soldering stuff, the rest is in boxes at the back. Moving on to the next bench. Underneath, just various trims and bits and pieces. Over there with things like screws, butane gas canisters and butane gas, workshop manuals, stickers and handbooks, more jet washer, gloves, hands. Over this side, fire extinguishers. Always have fire extinguishers in there. Extension air line and welding and brazing stuff down here at the bottom. I still use an old stick welder, but I'm kind of traditional that way. It does what I need it to do anyway. Up the top here, notice as well, you'll see regularly lights fitted everywhere. You can't have too much light in a workshop. Right, top of this bench, a double grinding wheel set up. Next to a Linishin sanding belt, and 6-inch wire wheel, and a parts washer and brushes. And the smaller of my two bench drills. Although this is primarily set up for polishing at the moment, it can still be used for doing drilling, particularly with very small bits that won't fit in the other drill easily. Right. A big chunky workshop vise next to it, followed by a bench top mill. roll gauges and such. And you'll find with this sort of tool, you'll end up spending just as much on the tooling and stuff for it as you actually do on the machine itself, so it's all budgeting for that. Down here, selection of bits I'm currently mucking around with, camera mounts to fit cameras on the bike, and bits from the Enfield. This is an interesting discovery because it's often believed that the Electra X, like mine, had a more traditional sort of looking Japanese mount for the fuel tap into the petrol tank. But it turns out it's threaded at the top, and the actual tap, got a sneaking feeling the tap itself, once it's separated off from the adapter, would probably go into an older Enfield tank. Oh well, we'll wait and see. Right, along here, the lathe. Immensely, unbelievable, useful tool. Again, to talk about tooling, there's all the tooling for it underneath, and such like. This is, if you look on YouTube, it might be long to find these, the ubiquitous Chinese mini lathe. Cheap, normally about 500-600 quid, and constantly getting horribly ripped apart by people criticising them online, which is fair in one way but not in another. If your hobby is precision engineering, and yet there are plenty of people who do that, I've got a slight interest in that myself, then yeah, these machines are perfect for that. They're cheap, you get lots of backlash in all the hand controls. It can be a bit stiff. They're not hugely, these markings here are not always hugely accurate. But for working on motorcycles, it does the trick perfectly. If you think about it, you're turning up things like wheel spacers, doing little jobs. Like for instance, a couple of months ago I fixed up a friend's 125 that had been in an accident, and I had to fix the steering lock on the bottom yoke because it was beyond the stage where I could fix it and bend it back. He couldn't really afford a new yoke. So what I did was I drilled the yoke with a smaller hole as possible and tapped it, but then I needed a bolt to go in it, the same thread, but with a lead which would effectively become the surface to establish the steering lock, if you see what I mean. So what I actually did is I got a large bolt, strapped it up in the old vice there, turned down the threaded section is what I wanted, then re-tapped that to fit the new tap in the bottom yoke, and it worked perfectly. Gave you what is essentially an adjustable steering lock on the bike. If that's all the sort of thing you're doing, these are great. They won't like turning stainless steel. They will do it if you use a high speed and very shallow cuts. Mild steel kind of okay on, but if you're doing things like wheel spacers, the material they just eat this is brass. If you don't mind working in brass, and let's be honest, it does look quite nice when it's done, these are perfect. So brass steel, you don't have to worry about, even if you don't have to worry about being accurate to hundredths of a millimetre, one of these will do the job you need perfectly. Moving on, sort of more general hand tools. This actually, I bought that the other week from a boot fair. It's bear in mind I'm 56 and this is 2022. That is my very first ever cordless drill, which I bought about 2 weeks ago. I've ordered up to now. Tell you what, it's brilliant. I've used it once, went straight through a thicker bit of metal than I thought it would, no trouble at all. And I thought, okay, wise move. There's all sorts here, from sabre saws, mini tools. That's the mains impact driver, car balancers, jacks. Moving on, more hand tools. Then you're moving on to chemicals and oils, bits and pieces. Moving on down, and your telescope. And a new front wheel for the Enfield at some point. It's called General Do-It-Yourself books, electrical bits and pieces, and spare parts for me cars, bikes, all sorts. Right up here, little boxes of things like O-rings and screws and washers and nuts. Now behind me and well lit up is a working bench. This is the bench I saved because of the good lighting. You can see it here. Principally on things like carburetors and stuff like that, and also for my other hobbies. So, in an anorak revealing moment, I also do plastic modelling in here. And yes, that is the refit Concentrated USS Enterprise, which is the current project. Underneath there, bits and pieces for modelling. Moving up to the end here, some old Ducati posters. Right. Drill bits, working their way through from cobalt through to titanium, cobalt coated, jobbing HSS ones in both metric and imperial, cutting compounds, deburring tools, scribes, punches, wire reels, that sort of. And round two, the biggest of my two bench vice drills. I don't know why I keep on trying to call my drills vices. The only trouble with this one, like I sort of briefly touched on earlier, is that it's such a big unit, some of the smaller drill bits won't fit in it. So it's easier then just to go back to the other smaller drill to do that. Next door to that, a 20-ton hydraulic press. And just to help with that, a box there of bearing and oil seal drifts. Right. We're now onto the handle wall. Screwdrivers, pliers, that sort of thing up the top there. Moving on down, just odds and sods. And you've got files and spare screwdrivers and stuff at the bottom, and brushes below that. Moving over, all stuff for sockets, saws, valve tools, hammers, oilers, mould grips, compression testers, all sorts over here. I first bought my first tools I bought when I was about 14 years old, and I got them from a well-known supplier of cheap tools these days before the internet, which was the local market stall. I've never spent a huge fortune on tools. I either buy them second hand or cheap brand new. And a lot of those original tools from when I was 14, that was 40 years ago, are still in here and in use. There is a difference. You can get good usable quality cheap tools, but you just need to have a close look at them and make sure you know what you're getting. And the other thing is, don't beyond their limits. Same goes for any tool really. If you're putting that much strain through it, you can feel like it's about to break. You're almost invariably using the wrong tool for the job. You need to move it up a level. Right. And at the end here, especially with bikes, the most important tools, little squeeze here. Spanners. Starting at the top, metric. With ring spanners, combination, open end, and at the end there, sockets. Different types and sizes. Middle bit, these are my BSF and Whitworth spanners. Principally put up to about late 60s. Covered there. And on the bottom here, AF. Now, AF is what's now usually regarded as the universal imperial standard. And it actually is a derivative of the UNC and UNF system from America. Late British bikes, early 70s, would sometimes use AF fittings. And Harleys, you can use AF spanners on those. But I say I don't actually have that much to do with Harleys, so these very, very rarely get touched. Right, serial kill apron, exceptionally useful if you're doing brazing or welding. Along with, I believe, no, my welding gloves are over there. Different variations of aprons and working coats. Now, as you can see on these, I tend to come in and get stuck straight in without bothering to put them on. I really must get out of that habit. Right, heaters and things over there when it's working in the winter. And that's it, that's pretty much the whole workshop. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little tour. Hopefully by next weekend my back will be a little bit back to normal and we can get back onto motorcycle related subjects. But until then, take care, ride safely and see you soon. Bye.